Thank you for having me here today. Actually, it's quite challenging, and when I was putting all these slides together and was thinking of the audience, I was saying, well, difficult to talk to you about technology, because actually I came here to learn from you about technology. So basically I had to turn it around. And the title of the session, which is about building new generation products and services, call a lot for all these new technologies, all these new complexities we were seeing yesterday, and actually during the workshops the day before yesterday. Then I said, okay, I'll try to cope with the challenge and talk about it from a very different perspective on how to build these new generation products and services from a standards perspective. And it's interesting because coming from the standards world, and all those of you who are around will see that standards and acronyms are kind of synonyms, and you can see it all throughout. Actually, the last time I was accused of putting too many slides with so many acronyms that nobody could even understand, even myself sometimes. So actually, I thought, well, let's try and see this from a different perspective. So what is it that we standards are doing, particularly for these new generation products and services? Why standards? And actually, I felt very much compelled about this way of focusing the discussion or the presentation because, well, in fact, I've had many requests and many questions from many people about, well, but the life of standards is over, isn't it? Everything is open source, so where are you going to do the day after tomorrow? And well, that's actually not what I'm experiencing from my own perspective, and of course, I'm a little bit biased. But I would like then to have this opportunity to remind most of you something that you already know about standards. Probably explaining to or those of you who have not been in touch with the standards world, some of the key fundamentals in the standards world. And last, though not least, trying to demystify some of the statements that are floating around and that risk of converting into reality. And we've heard a lot about that, how what someone says in a room ends up being what is real, even if it's not. So let me start with a big, basic, fundamental. Standards, yes, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of interfaces, everything. But the ultimate goal of standards is business. Is finding solutions to problems you have and trying to find the solutions in a cooperative manner. So it's not, I myself have a problem, I will solve it, and that's it. But the problem is challenging and big enough to have some of the colleagues help me solve the problem, because very probably this same problem is reproducing and happening elsewhere. Creating economies of scale. I mean, days are gone when someone came with a solution, deployed the solution, and everybody bought the solution, and it was the solution. And then you replicated that one, particularly when it comes to telecom networks or IT networks. Because we need to rely on many people working together and therefore creating the right economies of scale. Interoperability is key in standards. At the end of the day, what we are trying to do is how my product A interoperates with product B so that I can make them interchangeable, or we have heard about roaming, or we have heard of something much simpler, how my telephone will work with different networks coming from different vendors without having to change my phone. And at the end of the day, what in the standards bodies we do is trying to help this happen. In fact, if you think of it, standardization is one of the very, very few occasions where antitrust authorities allow competitors to work together. Because the aim and the goal is bigger and better for the whole of society than trying to go in the antitrust regulations. So what standards bodies have to do is provide the right rules to prevent antitrust activities, the right tools to allow you work in a right manner, and something which is very important and sometimes we forget, and sure, those of you working in standards don't, is networking, getting to know all your peers that are working all throughout the world, and that enables you to have this good exchange. Because, I said it, standards are about business, and business need stability. Otherwise, if you create uncertainties, money won't come. And that you see every day. So what we're trying to provide is this certainty for which all people working on standards know that at the end of the day, the quality of what these bodies deliver is no question, second to none. Because at the end of the day, and it has been said in these sessions several times, someone needs to implement what has been specified. And if this implementation is not right, because what has been specified is not right, we might face problems. This is like a little staircase where you go step by step, building on standards and enabling to innovate on top of the last step. And then create a new step and keep on innovating. You don't have to reinvent the wheel once and again and again and again. So they are fundamental to boost innovation. This has to make those standards future-proof, and of course, and it was said yesterday, when we talk about telecom networks, we need to understand that maybe we need to look backwards, and we cannot trash all the legacy we have. So we need to keep this path of evolution. We need to make those backwards compatible. And again, I'll insist on interoperability, but what we do about it is let's test. Once you've developed your standard, let's try to implement the product and see how it works. And this is the only way in which we will avoid vendor lock-in. And vendor can be understood in a very wide manner. So it's sometimes not just a company. It might be a group of companies working on a specific project that if it's the only one, if there's no interoperability, if you engage in that project, maybe that's a project lock-in. And I don't think that's something we want to see. Because, yes, we've seen it several times. Systems and technology are growing and growing in complexity. That's inevitable. And that's what we ask for it, because we need more functionality. We want to do many more things with the technology we have, to access to more places. Of course, that requires complexity. It's inevitable. But at the end of the day, at the side of users, all these products are easier and easier to use. But in order to arrive to this conclusion, you need to have a common base, and everybody needs to understand this common base. So what standards are trying to get to is this clear baseline from which you can keep on growing, from which you can keep on innovating. It's very difficult to, and I'll use one of the open source terms to fork and fork and fork, and well, which is the right leg that will prevail and will stay, and will that be the only one? So if you have some kind of reference, some kind of anchor, then you'll be sure that there are many possible implementations. It's not just one. And open source is one possible implementation, or several different open source projects might be a route to implement, or specific companies or enterprises that want to do their own implementation. Why not? As long as those are interoperable. Fair enough, open market. This will allow us as well for continuous improvement because, again, you have a baseline where to step on. And I'm insisting, but quality is non-negotiable. And I won't, of course, hide that there are many challenges that every one of us is facing. But again, and I won't hide, I'm very biased. I think standards are a good way of addressing those challenges. I said about large-scale deployments, you need certainty that those deployments, those investments that you have put on your products, on your networks, will still be valuable and valid certain years. You need a return on your investment. So you need some certainty on that. You need to address mass markets. And by the way, that's maybe the easy bit. Okay, you deploy network, then you have a big set of customers that will be subscribing to that network. Now, what if you have to address specific niche markets and needs? Probably if you are able to get together different niche markets that might be in different geographies, in different places, by joining them all, you create, again, a large market. Think of critical communications systems. So how do blue light services deploy and have their own telecom networks? Those are very tiny. Those are very specific, related to a specific need. And it's very difficult to grow volume there. How do we make it sustainable, the growth and maintenance of these kinds of services? We need to ensure that what we deliver is correct and has the right quality. And that's why we promote and we push a lot for quality, but to test this conformance with the standard. So we invite those who have developed their technology to come and test that the standard is correct, that the implementation is right according to the standard, but that those implementations can interoperate with other implementations. Security, I think I won't extend on this one. We've heard about security during the workshops. Yesterday there was some discussion around security and how important it is to ensure future. What I can say is that when we work on standards, at least when we work on ETSI standards, we have this motto of security by design, which means that anything we start has the kind of security conscience attached to it, and it's a sine qua non for our standards development. And last but not least, because I'm a little bit fed up of listening and saying, people saying, well, but you know, you standards guys are slow, things are endless, you need to go through other means. Well, yes and no. On one side, process-wise, it's true that we have a lot to learn, and we are learning. On the other side, what really takes time to get standards ready is consensus. But also what experience have shown us is that the best way of putting standards out and getting technology deployed against that standard is that that standard has been achieved through consensus. Because it's what industry has agreed at the end of the day. So what will be developed and delivered will actually hit the marketplace. We have also experienced the times when a solution has been pushed by voting and by getting majority by whatever means. And it's yet another nice book on our shelves that has not really come with a product hitting the market. And that's not really what we want. So sometimes it's better waiting a couple of months than rushing to something that will actually not help our purposes. So, indeed, all this I have told about, I'm sorry because I'm repeating myself, you already knew about it. There's nothing new. I just thought it was meant, or it was a good opportunity to remind us of what's behind all the work that many people are putting on standards. And I guess the test or the proof that this is working this way is that on one side, many people have decided some point in time that we should go for network functions virtualization and make of it a standard, and we are happy to be home to that standardization work. But after that one came many others, and you heard about multi-edge, multi-access edge computing, you heard about next generation protocols, open source MANO, and so on and so forth. And still coming, because still, indeed, we will have to do many more things than standardizing. But this is key. And I'm saying we have to do much more because, again, nobody can do it alone. We have some pieces of standards that are being developed in ETSI, some pieces of standards we partner, and all of us have heard about the evolution of LTE and now 5G, where ETSI is partnering with some others in our 3GPP project. But also, we have heard about cooperation between standards, open source projects. It's absolutely very, very important. We need to leverage on everybody's skills, and there's complementarity to it. In fact, we have found nice ways of having a quick implementation route to what is being standardized, but also a quick learning route to understand what's missing in what's being standardized. So you solidify the baseline, but can have very quick, iterative implementation cycles. And to that, all the work we're doing around open source is proving very, extremely helpful. So just to wrap up, because I think that was a little bit my purpose. So standards meant to drive business, and we understand that solidity, stability is key to business to flourish. That as we see how technology complexity grows, you need some solid baselines on which to have your innovation being supported. That we at ETSI are being home to many of these initiatives, and that we are very proud of. By the way, it's you who are starting and bringing those initiatives to us. But we understand that nobody can do it alone, so we are very keen to keep on partnering and sharing with all our colleagues all throughout. And having said that, a presentation without a single acronym, so I think that's track record for us. Thank you.
I apologize about the question, but you know, in the IP network, we had one big network with one standard to deliver a packet from one side to the other. Only the two sides understand what it's in the packet. That's how it was open. But we needed that standard. SDN, NFV, network slicing, cloud, all these things actually enable us to develop many protocols that can deliver this packet from one side to the other, which means that we could have no standard or a standard or everything in between. And that's the flexibility in NFV-SDN that will take us to the next level, the next degree of openness, where I don't have to have one size fits all mechanism to deliver packet from one side to the other, which means it opened a lot of flexibility for innovation for open source only, or standard only, or standard that is for a smaller community that is optimized for this community. So how you see yourself fit into this revolution?
Probably I'm not the most technical guy to be able to respond to that very specific question, but I will try and turn it a little bit. You have one IP network that's connecting A with B, and you say, well, whatever you put on top of there, as long as it keeps on connecting A to B, I'm happy with. Now, if what you're connecting from A to B is a kind of communication that, let's say, is a voice communication, or if what you're connecting A to B, it's video, or whether you're connecting A to B is whatever else, then what you're saying is, well, people will have to put different things on top to make that happen, right? Now what I say is, all that has to come on top should come from 1, 2, 3 end vendors. How should those things that come on top have to relate one to the other? Only through the IP, or should there be anything else? So I'm trying to grow the thing and seeing when we specify a network, and then I'll go to mobile networks that I know a little bit better, then there are plenty of interfaces, and each interface or each number of interfaces define a little box in the middle that is doing several things, but at the end of the day has to communicate with several others. And what people want is being able to get this little box here and being able to change the box. Is that working with software as well? Maybe it is. I'm hearing more and more that it's the same thing. I want to take this module, unplug it, and plug some other module that's more efficient, that's adding something else, whatever. So at the end of the day, you need a minimum set of standards that set these interfaces. So that's the way I see it. And again, I'm not the technical guy. Sure, several others here in the room will be able to build on that. Thank you.
Luis, I have a background in, actually I've been attending and participating in ETSI NFV since the beginning. I was involved in the Open Networking Foundation, plus I was involved in the open source community as well. And my question really relates to that. I mean, in the traditional sense, standards used to drive implementations. In the Open SDN and NFV world, there's a lot more interaction between the implementations and the standards. One of the challenges we've had, though, is that the way standards bodies operate and the way open source projects operate are very different. Everything from, the obvious one is intellectual property rights, where there's much less constraints in the open source world than in the standards world. But also just in the sense that in the open source world, there is a blurring between whether an open source development is a standard and what kind of constraints should be, or what kind of limits should be placed by standards on the implementations themselves to make them useful to operators. So the question I have is, we don't have a place right now to even have a discussion in a formal sense between a standards body and an open source community. Does ETSI have any plans to address it, or does ETSI have a thought on this? Because this is an area that I've personally been involved in for years now, and I don't see a obvious answer unfolding.
Well, actually, there's a lot of discussion ongoing. So internally in ETSI, we are having this discussion at several levels, by the way, and we are trying to have this discussion as well with open source foundations. So we need to entertain this discussion because I agree with you, this has not happened. Ways of working are different, and we need to respect that. And then we need to find the ways in which we can, interlink. Actually, part of this discussion resulted inside ETSI in an open source project inside ETSI. And even inside ETSI, we're trying to, how would I say, improve this communication, this relationship. So it's very valid comment. And yes, this is something we are looking at very, very carefully. Thank you.
We're going to take one more. Hi, my name is Srilakshmi from Verizon. One of the main issue we have in Verizon is, if you were there yesterday, was interoperability of VNFs. And we have struggled a lot to get the service chain aspect of it in different VNFs. So my question to you is, how much of this standardization VNF vendors wants to take time and effort and money to kind of participate to in ETSI to kind of say that, yes, we wanted to get it standardized? What's your take from that side?
Could you repeat the question, please? Because
so VNF vendors, how much they are interested in getting their VNF standardized, and how much time, effort they are spending with you folks to get the interoperability of VNFs getting standardized?
I confess I didn't get the, yeah, sorry, could you?
The question is pretty much, Verizon's had a lot of problems with interoperability of VNFs, right?
Yes,
How much of that work can ETSI take on, of making sure that the VNFs are going to interoperate?
Diego.
Zero?
No, Diego. I'm pointing at the guy who's basically.
Well, I can.
No, because Diego, I'm going to say there's a lot going on because actually that's what we are thinking. But
basically, there is something important to take into account, that a standard is not a religious dogma. We are not going to ban anyone if they don't comply to the standards. It's precisely a matter. The standard is an enabler for the market. It's an enabler for business. That depends very much on the operators, for example, buying from the vendors, to enforce them to follow the standard. If, for whatever the reason, some of the standards have a problem that allow for, I don't know how to call it, loopholes in which different vendors can play, come to the standards body and make your case, and we will change the standard.
Which basically is, from the standards perspective, yes, we are looking at that.
Exactly.
Now, if implementations do not follow the standard,
it's up to the market.
But that goes with BNFs, or that goes with any other.
And another point, we are, and you are encouraged to participate in interoperability events, in which what we are doing is precisely asking people to come, bring their VNFs, bring their orchestration environments, and test how they work. The third one is in June, if I remember well, in France. The first one was in Madrid, the second one was somewhere in France, it was?
France, yeah.
And the third one is going to be in Sofia Antipolis as well. They are huge events, a couple of hundreds of people during a couple of weeks, plugging and unplugging things, testing, and moving around. Come there and feel it.
So the pressure is on the vendors to comply with the standards, and then an opportunity is to work within the interoperability labs to ensure that before they get into the carrier labs that some of these VNFs interoperate. But no easy answer, right? Yeah.
But how much are they willing to do that? That was my question. I mean, vendors.
How committed are they to it? Yeah.
I mean, do you see they are interested, not interested? That was my question. Actually,
operators have a very strong position asking the vendors to respect standards, and this has happened. I mean, you're talking about BNFs, but this happens with any other product or node that you want to put into your network. So it's in your hands, in fact.
Okay, we have to move on, but thank you very
Thank you.
much. It
Sorry.
was very interesting. Thank you, and some good conversation.